In December of 2021, millions of viewers tuned into the Game Awards. Here were showcased dozens of world premieres while celebrating the year's finest games and experiences. In a coveted time slot just 3 slots before the announcement of the Game of the Year, the coup de grace of a 3+ hour long stream came a world premiere from Swedish developer Embark. Comprised of ex-DICE devs and plenty of other talent, this game was poised to be their first production as a studio, bringing players a cooperative, third-person, PvE, free-to-play experience for PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S, slated for release in 2022. But then, something changed. Years go by with minimal updates or details, but an announcement was made in mid-2024 that Arc Raiders would be coming in 2025, and that was it, until today. So what is Arc Raiders? Arc Raiders is now and will be released as a dubbed PvPvE third-person action survival shooter. A long-winded way to kind of say extraction shooter, one that's set in a gorgeous world and being a AAA entry accessible for all players on PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S, something that isn't necessarily the norm with the genre, including consoles in this. Arc Raiders is set on a future Earth, the year is 2180, where the mysterious Arc machines threaten any possible settlement on the surface, and most communities are forced below ground to survive. You, a raider, head to the surface to scavenge the remnants of the lost world, facing the deadly Arc machines, and along the way, other raiders. Whether they're friend or foe is entirely up to you. Each run, you can choose to go in solo or squad up with upwards of 2 other players for teams of 3 to get into, loot up, and make it out alive. So yes, solo play is going to be an option here, again, something that isn't conventionally the case with a lot of extraction shooters now. Your loadout will consist of weaponry, gadgets, armor, ammo, and a melee raider tool, and a cool entry to this is a free loadout, something that for those that want to save some of their cool loot, you have for either a special run where you try and take down, let's say, the Queen, an endgame Arc machine that from our playtest, those who tried, it took the majority of the lobby working together and they still didn't take it down. But if you want to save your gear, you can opt for a free loadout that will be random inferior loot of all base versions, but gives you everything you could need to survive while still salvaging around for upgrades in world, and potentially even taking down enemy opponents and stealing their loot. But remember, all while anything that you really want to keep safe is available to be stored in your safe pocket that upon death will not be lost, whereas everything else will be. So what's your objective? For the gameplay loop, it's pretty simple. Get in, salvage, and collect as much as you can by either looting or seeking out other raiders to take their stuff and getting out alive. But out of game, that gameplay loop is much deeper than it would appear. The world of Speranza offers a lot to do. In-game, admittedly, I think that it suffers from the same things that you could say about Marathon most recently, in that the in-world, there's not really any objectives around the map to do other than loot up, survive, and scavenge each of these maps. But where this differs tremendously and does not feel like a problem at all is the depth beneath the surface, both figuratively and literally. While in your out-of-match area of Speranza, your civilization here, there is so much to do, to upgrade, and to experience that makes each run to the surface a bit more rewarding and offers a bit more to do, even if, again, in match itself, it's not explicitly laid out for you. First, you have level progression, where this is your player level progression through successful raids, extraction, loot, kills acquired, contract completion, and more. Ranking up gets you more access to bonuses, but nothing that really impedes your progression as a newer player facing, say, a long-time veteran solely based on level. Leveling up also grants you additional Raider tokens, a premium currency earned by just playing the game that you can then use on things like cosmetics or outfits or battle pass access, that too being progressible with credits earned from challenges, but more on that in a little bit. You also have things like a skill tree, which this has 3 branches of upgradable abilities: conditioning, mobility, and survival, each with unique attributes that help out each individual branch. Each of these have 15 skills that you can master, requiring 5 skill points each before unlocking them fully. Skill points are earned by successful extractions, so for those wondering, it'd take you a minimum of 225 runs to the surface, assuming you successfully extract at the end, to fully max out your skill tree. These upgrades include things like base stamina increases, regeneration of stamina over time, climbing and vaulting quicker, looting bags faster, things like that. The nice part, from what I noticed at least, is that while this offers a ton in regards to upgrades to make for yourself, this doesn't necessarily tilt the scales in one direction or the next when it comes to the inevitable PvP elements. Like weapons and shields aside, the core elements of a player's skill tree will not impact a gunfight all that much, if at all, when a player is a level 1 just starting out versus, say, a level 100 who maybe has nearly maxed out their entire skill tree. So it's just another level of depth to help you out and give you something to work towards. Build crafting is also massive within Arc Raiders. You have a workshop that you can end up upgrading to add more things and upgrading the workbenches in them. From there, you can see things like the basic bench, which is used for your basic but crucial items, a lot of base level things. This can't seemingly be upgraded from what we played in our play session. The weapons bench, used to craft weapon attachments, upgrade weapons, and even build base weapons and more. The equipment bench was used for augments and shields, expanding your backpack and storage and such like that. The med station was used for crafting and upgrading medical and healing items. The utility bench was used for barriers, lures, and other things like that. Refiner was used for custom parts, and the explosive bench was used for your explosives and throwables. Crafting utilizes a ton of different loot throughout the Rust Belt in Arc Raiders. I was pleasantly surprised by how many things you can loot by comparison to games releasing recently, but when you jump in, it seems like while you're looting a lot of this, you're getting a ton of junk, perhaps, like quite literally metal and rubber parts that seems like scrap. They all come in handy at some points. Also, keep in mind Scrappy, your resident rooster who's been living in your quarters since before you got there. He finds and collects spare parts from around Speranza and brings them back to you so that after every single run, you get an assortment of base parts and a few random goodies in there as well that can help with upgrades, crafting new items, things like that. Not only can you interact with, craft, and sort of purchase items directly from these benches, you can also upgrade them as well, the benches themselves, to get even better gear at naturally higher costs, but it is something that makes those later sort of in progression runs easier to regain from if you have these items to craft higher level loot instead of having to either find them randomly or go up against a very kitted enemy to take it off of them. So looking for required recipe items for upgrading your benches is incredibly important to the overall flow of the game's progression. Traders are also a way to gather specific items you may need, but at a premium cost instead of just crafting it yourself, like buying it from a vendor already pre-made. Which, speaking of vendors, this brings into question questing. Each trader is themed to their own workstation, and for keen-eyed viewers, they're actually characters from the original 2021 announcement footage, but repurposed, not as the playable characters, but instead characters seen in world, offering you new opportunities and abilities to buy certain items. You have characters like TON, which is the gun shop where you can buy specific weapons. Apollo is grenades and gadgets. Lance is your clinical or medical items. Each of these all come along with progressible quest challenges to complete in any run you may choose. Interestingly though, and perhaps it's my ignorance, the quests are actually interesting in this game because with the build we had, and you'll see in the tech test, something you can't select is 1 or 2 from a trader at a given time, going at whatever pace you'd like. Instead, the quests are individual and jump from trader to trader after completing the prior, getting you to interact with a wide range of different items as you progress through your questing. So kind of cool, kind of different, and a little bit of something that maybe slows down the pace a little bit, but cool no less in its own right. On a smaller scale, you have things like weapon upgrades and crafting, which we'll detail a little bit further on when we're talking about the gameplay items and things and not necessarily the grinds, but weapons can be upgraded, repaired, touched up with attachments, adjusted, and or sold. There's tons of stuff you could do with that. Battle passes will be another thing that you can progressively grind through, but Embark and Arc Raiders have a positive spin on this. I know that the sort of sentiment surrounding battle passes is kind of grim, and it's not necessarily something that people really want to hear all that much about anymore. It's kind of a point of annoyance for a lot of players, but battle passes in this game can be purchased for Raider tokens. Again, that currency you gain simply by playing the game and leveling up. Once you've acquired a battle pass, you can buy items inside that pass with cred, another type of currency, a secondary type if you will, that is awarded by completing daily challenges, specific missions and tasks that reset every 24 hours, so playtime and conscious progression go hand in hand. But so far, it's not detailed any actual monetary transactions will need to take place. Now, it's not yet known if these passes work like war bonds from Helldivers, persisting forever until completed, or if they're seasonal time limit items, but so far, not a bad way to handle the pass system that many find to be intrusive to the gameplay experience. This instead, rewarding and incentivizing play in particular. In the tech test too, we had access to 3 different passes to choose from. The shuttered storefront, the more sort of cleaner role look to its cosmetics, the secluded courtyard following a space theme a bit, and then Back Alley Market, which is a more Wild West design of the cosmetics. And if all of this wasn't enough, there's mastery on top of everything here that will track your best in-game performances, along with mastering various other elements of the game that you can keep track of. So when we talk about it, there's so much more to the game beneath the surface, figuratively and literally, there is so much to do here still, despite in-game there might not be like contracts you can pick up and try and complete in the 25 minutes you have for each run. Now, the content that we were able to play on, the maps, I was pleasantly surprised here at this. We had 3 maps available in this closed tech test session, where we had Dam, the Spaceport, and Buried City. Dam was the Alcantara power plant, which, in lore, it stands as a silent sentinel amidst a toxic waterlogged land, nourishing a riot of resilient vegetation and fauna, and was a once monument echoing the power once generated. This map, given certain weather conditions, is some of the coolest visuals that I've seen in gaming recently, and that's saying a lot considering the game itself is just gorgeous. From the lush forest to the destroyed and decayed landmarks to the marshland that is home to a giant harvester, if you're so unlucky to come across it, it's definitely one that makes for a lot of different gameplay engagements. The spaceport was the Akara spaceport, and it's described as a majestic testament to humanity's past ambitions, where Exodus shuttles, vessels, and hope and desperation once roared into the heavens, leaving Earth behind. This map came in a variety of weather conditions, ranging from sunny and open and all that, to rainy with minimal visibility over distance, but the combination of open fields to refineries, warehouses, and launch facilities proved plenty of high-value loot opportunities, but also plenty of firefights you might end up encountering. And then Buried City was a remnant of the old world, unlike the cold steel spires of the Exodus age, amidst the sand dunes of an arid wasteland. The narrow streets and empty plazas offer a glimpse into how people once lived. This was a more claustrophobic feeling map, where building rooftops and narrow corridors of the interiors of apartments create these choke points unlike any other map, where verticality suddenly meets the ground floor. In our testing, we had a night raid on this map, something that may be coming for other maps, but was only seen in our play session on Buried City, that offered a wholly different experience to the gameplay. Visibility was scarce, flashlights, while helpful, gave away your positions. Stealth was absolutely key, but sometimes, with the Ark around, that's impossible to keep a stealthy environment going. Now, as for your loot stash and other things like that, the economy of Arc Raiders is something that's rather in-depth as well, depending on how you look at it. Like your stash, what you have available to store outside of game. Everything you collect will eventually funnel into the stash. This is something you start with 80 different slots, but you can upgrade as you go along, though increasingly for more cost in coins. Though I think it's worth it. You start with 80, you go to 110 at the next upgrade, and 140 is after that. I personally didn't see if we could upgrade further in our tech test beyond 140, but I'd be really curious to know the price of that if we could, because to go from 110 to 140 to get an additional 30 slots was a 50,000 coin expansion cost. So that's something that if you end up checking this game out, that's a very hefty price tag. That is the heftiest price tag I saw out of anything that I could buy. Backpacks and shields are available here to give you more storage in-game and also give you a bit more health in-game. The backpack types, these were called Raider Augments, ranging anywhere from 1 to 4 in your sort of color scaling progressive of green, blue, pinkish, and then gold, granting larger sizes of backpack space and storage in match, but then also offering varying levels of safe pockets. Like a lot of your base augments, your level 1 or 2 may offer 2 safe pockets that you can only keep 2 stacks of items safe if you persist and die. But 3 is whenever you get to your augment 3 and 4 level. Your shield types, these offer more health and allow you to take more damage in gunfights, but also have a few prerequisites to go about with them. You have light, medium, heavy, and presumably something of a legendary tier, though I didn't personally find one of those. I only found up to the pink level, heavy shield. This heavy and above can only be equipped with a Raider Augment 3 carry capacity or higher, meaning that at your backpack of common or rare rarity, you're not going to be able to equip those higher shields. So heavy shields offer incredible benefits to healing in game, but are going to require a bit more to end up having, kind of building you as a player up progressively rather than having something tilt more towards healing and health versus carrying more in your capacity. A sort of balancing act at what level loot you end up having. Then for your loot and such, you have the ability to sell, repair, and recycle just about anything. Selling items is pretty straightforward. You get coins, the sort of tertiary currency in the game, though likely most abundantly used. Like I said, I used coins to upgrade my stash from 110 to 140 for 50,000 coins, but this is something you can end up buying from traders with this currency and using it, again, probably the most. You can sell items you find, weapons, or any other type of utility. If it's in your inventory, it can be sold. Repairing items is something that we mentioned with the workbenches, but only kind of briefly in passing. Each item you use, like a shield, weapon, and such, they have a durability rating where in order to keep them working properly or from perhaps being destroyed altogether, didn't get that far, they need to be repaired. This costing coins, again, the tertiary currency we just talked about, from selling items in-game, keeping your high-tier loot ready to go, and being conscious of needing to do that. And then finally, recycling was something that I likely used the least out of all of this, but still offered value in certain situations. This was the ability to essentially reverse craft items. How you can make things out of base materials you'll find, this instead dissects whatever you had and grants more base items in exchange for that completed item, breaking them down in a sense, oftentimes being useful for specific items in questing or upgrades elsewhere. Frankly, I'm probably going to miss a lot when it comes to dissecting everything here with this, but that's a lot of the base of what you need to know. Arc Raiders enters its second tech test here tomorrow and lasts until May 4th, available to play on all platforms of PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, as well as PC through Steam or the Epic Games Store. But how do I feel about this game? Let's talk about my impressions. So if you've been around the channel a little while, you'll know that extractions aren't entirely my thing. Like, I like the concept of them. I've dabbled in content for some of them, but it's one of those things that I've just never had one that really pulls me in and really keeps me there. I got interested in Marathon based off the art direction and the lore and storytelling here that was possible. I think that the story of Marathon is going to be really cool. I don't necessarily know if the gameplay is going to hold up as what we've seen in the alpha, but that's a different story for a different day. This game, I'm absurdly interested in this for the visual aesthetic and the depth of the game itself. For this being a simple tech test, I was very pleasantly surprised for how fleshed out it felt. Through the near 10 hours of playtime that I was afforded over 3 days of an early capture session, at no point did I feel like I had nothing to do. And again, that's with a seemingly lack of genuine things to do in-match, like contracts once you're in the world to try and complete. In-match events or quests, you had very minimal. You had like a supply cache you could open up that you required a battery to take that from one location to the cache itself. You had larger arc machines you could take on, but nothing that was really like an activated in-game event. Yet every single raid I ran, I was focused on a task at hand. Depending on the seasonal length, this could be incredible for longevity of the game. Perhaps a bit frustrating depending on who you ask, but I imagine if everything were to reset with a seasonal wipe, including things like your skill tree, let's say every 3 to 4 months or so, everyone started at square one. We talked about how to max everything out. You're required to have 225 successful raid extractions at the minimum just for your skill tree. For a lot of people, that's not going to happen, and so there's always something to work towards, even if it's just upgrading your skills. For the diehards that do that, that's a hell of a long grind to sink in with a conscious goal in mind. But again, that's without thinking about looting, doing any story elements to uncover the narrative throughout the world, upgrading any workbenches, weapons, gear, all that kind of stuff, not doing any quests for traders to get better and better loot. There is actually so much to do for a game that isn't attempting to be a live service per se. It certainly keeps you busy in between major updates that may come along the way. Graphically, I think this game is also beautiful. I had no doubt this game would look good because it's Embark. Their collective track record before the formation of Embark and their work together on the finals proved to me that they know how to make a game look beautiful. This somber atmosphere, though, really conveys the feeling of a world in decay where a post-apocalyptic future is overrun by robots, where it's both futuristic but decaying. It's an art style we've seen attempted before, but I feel like this one really nails it. The scenic landscapes of each of these maps we had available really had me feeling the vastness of the scale, the sense of a world around me where it was just aesthetically pleasing. You mix that in with the lighting, their dynamic weather, it felt like every time I stopped, I was looking at what could be a marketing screenshot for the game, right there controllable by me. That's hard to capture. It was also incredibly surprising to me the performance that I had while loading these landscapes while playing this match that stretched this vastness of the world. I play at 4K Ultra to try and push everything to make it graphically the best on any game we play here on the channel, so I'm not going to be pushing like 250 FPS or anything like that, but it was still something that I was getting decent frame rate. I wasn't having a ton of hitching or anything that would happen as I was playing. It did happen here and there, but overall, I was pleasantly surprised with how beautiful it looked, the performance that it ended up outputting as well. The minimum specs for this game also allow for easy access for just about any system that was built for more than just word processing and on-the-go word-based events like just typing stuff on a laptop. If you have something that can do more than that in like the last 10 years, you can play this game, it seems like. Now, the feel of the game, one of the things that I don't know if I'll be alone in this thought, but made a decent bit of sense to me when I thought about it was this kind of feels like an Extraction version of Helldivers. And perhaps that's just the third-person perspective mixed with the fluidity of the movement and how it felt, but I also kind of consider this to be the case when taking a stab in the dark at another theory that initially maybe this was supposed to be like Helldivers 2, a free-to-play third-person PvE co-op experience. Now, minus the barrier of entry that is a price point for Helldivers, that's a perfect descriptor of what Helldivers is. Now, that could have been cause for some pivot, could have been just a direction internally that is entirely disconnected from that thought process, but it's something that I think kind of feels like a Helldivers Extraction, which is pretty cool. Either way, I was pleasantly surprised with the polish of this. That's the one big thing that I really want to stress on. If you were saying this released today, I wouldn't be surprised based off the mechanics, based off the feel of the game. That's pretty cool. Combat, PvP is inevitable. That's just the way that it is with these games, but it was an interesting balance, I think, because naturally with extraction shooters and persisting loop type games, the players who are on a roll tend to continue to stay on a roll with the highest tier loot, the highest tier shields. Like those situations, I did find myself in straight up gunfights, tearing through enemies, which is definitely something that is to be expected, but that doesn't mean that you're invincible. You can still die relatively quick and are still susceptible to third-party fights or somebody that may be flanking you, things that can catch you off guard. It's nothing that felt too overpowered, which is a hard thing to come by in balance with these types of games. You definitely still have the chance of, oh, if I take all this good loot in here, I could still lose it. That is something that I like the risk and reward of that. Looting was something that, again, I was pleasantly surprised with how much was actually lootable within the game. Not to draw comparisons too much to one game, but just because we've recently talked about it, Marathon was one of those things that we talked about. That was a stressor point for me, talking about my initial play session with that, where it seemed like you had this massive world, you had a bunch of these different outpost buildings, but not a lot of stuff was actually lootable of those. In Arc Raiders, you can end up tearing open cabinets, pulling out little drawers of basically everything, and while there are parts where you'll be like, wow, I can't believe that that little sort of buried building didn't have any loot in it, there's a lot more situations where you'll be like, oh, I didn't expect that drawer to have something in it. So that's definitely cool. One thing that I do think would be nice is that if there was a sort of marker or indicator that if you have an active quest available or an upgrade recipe that you're tracking, because that's something you can do as well, I would very much so like that to be a case of if it's one of those items that goes to one of those actively tracked recipes or something like that, or something you need for an upgrade that you are aware of or tracking, that it would show you a sort of icon that, hey, this is just a little bit of a heads up, you do need this item. I think that'd be cool, but it's also not something that's the end of the world. Also kind of adds a little bit of a strategy to it, realizing what you have to go in for. So I guess it's just a sort of preference in design decision. Now, pros and cons, honestly, this is just a little brief rundown of what I liked and disliked here out of this. Full stop, I really enjoyed the time that I had with this, but a few things that did stand out to me. That skill tree was super cool as an addition, I think, as a pro. It adds longevity to do more things, creating depth that otherwise wouldn't be there, all while not directly tipping the scales of what could be PvP engagements. Mechanically, I thought the game felt great. The third-person nature was great, fluid. You had really nice shoulder swapping mechanics, which I think should be standard for any third-person game. That's definitely a nice thing here at this, that allowed you to interact with and adapt to any situation that called for that sort of circumstance. The workbenches were a really cool element to the amount to do, but are also an alternative way to regain after a bad loss or maybe a few. I know myself, I go on a skid quite a bit, and I did even in our play sessions. I had a couple of games where I got a little low on loot, where I was like, I'm gonna go and craft some stuff here that otherwise I'd have to buy and kind of bankrupt myself. In the same vein, the free loadouts was an incredible option here that offers a way to go in without risking too much, or again, to maybe get yourself out of a situation where you're on a losing skid and you don't want to take that last bit of loot that you have saved up. As I mentioned, the worlds themselves are just incredibly gorgeous. There's a lot in terms of things to avoid / engage with. Obviously, your arc machines you want to stay away from as much as possible, but when you see those things like the giant harvester, or perhaps the queen way off in the distance, or unfortunately sometimes you can spawn right next to them, it's one of those things that makes you pick up and absolutely run out of there. Personally, I also liked a lot of the conscious elements when it came to crafting. A lot of the stuff that you had to do when you were trying to upgrade your weapons. Like, the one thing that I was playing around with early on was some of the base default weapons, like a level 1 just common rifle. This was something that came in at, I want to say, like 8 to 10 rounds to start or something like that, and then upon upgrading it 3 or 4 times, you still only had 20 rounds to work with, but you also had increased handling. You also had a couple of different attributes that made it worthwhile, but you had to consciously recognize, hey, I have to sacrifice a couple of things here and there to get 4 steps above to where it's maybe a competitive weapon, which added a sort of high risk, high reward type of situation for making it something that could go up against a more rare or legendary type of weapon. Now, as for things that I would like to maybe see changed a little bit here at this, the AI was in most cases a nuisance rather than an actual threat. There's a part of it I think just teeters back and forth on, I like them being there to annoy you versus actually being something you should be scared of. The armored and larger enemies were definitely something you did not want to mess around with. Like, I got messed up at one point by one of the larger armored bots, but other than that, they weren't really problematic, especially if you were like on the outside or kind of going to medium tier loot zones. You weren't going to the middle of the map. Though, in all fairness, again, with the AI tracking and how locked on they became, it was pretty powerful as a nuisance. So I guess if you stayed around those nuisances for too long, they could become a threat, and if you are firing back at them, it creates a lot of noise that could attract other players. Another thing that I wasn't a huge fan of was you couldn't swap certain things out mid-raid. Like, the biggest and most notable I found was a larger augment, so your backpacks. Either if you found it in-world or off an enemy dead body, you wouldn't be able to end up just equipping that immediately, swapping it out for your current augment, gaining like 4 to 8 extra slots in your backpack. This is something you had to stash that augment, take it out of the game and extract, and then end up equipping it before going into your next round. So it wasn't something that just gave you the additional slots. It cost an inventory slot and was something that was more future-proofing rather than immediate use, which I think would have just been more beneficial to the player in the moment. But other than that, there's not a whole ton in regards to complaints that I had about the game. Again, pleasantly surprised with the level of polish, with where this was after just being a tech test, which makes me hopeful that we see this launch at some point in the near future. It said 2025, but we have absolutely no idea at what point that will actually be. Personally, I'm kind of stuck on if I want to do main channel content here on this, or if I just use this for the second channel, because there is so much potential, I think, in terms of content. Storylines for runs, guides for contracts, guides for crafting and such, but it's also not a first-person shooter as to what I've tried to expand here on the channel outwards to other FPS games that I guess we'll just see where this goes. But that is Arc Raiders, again, available as a tech test to sign up for and hopefully get in if you can for this upcoming week to weekend. So let me know your thoughts down below. What do you guys think of Arc Raiders here? Do you like the direction that it's going? Do you like the look of it? Do you like the feel of the gameplay? Let me know. That's where we're gonna wrap it up. So thanks so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like on it. And of course, make sure to subscribe for more FPS content and other game reviews like this, as well as maybe check out the second channel where we might be posting more of this here over the tech test and into the future. But for now, thanks so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care and peace.